Hello everybody, it's a Wyvern here with another bit of Total War, Warhammer 2, quick match gameplay. This time around we are on the map Aymara Swamps for a bit of Empire against Lizardmen fighting. And, of course, I did decide to try something once again a little new. I try to experiment with different strategies for these videos. I'd never like to kind of show the same strategy more than once or twice. I definitely tried to mix things up. So in this situation, I tried to do something a little different from what I've been doing with Empire, often relying on great swords with some dirt cheap units like spears and flagellants to fill in the blanks for the front line. Instead, I've gone with straight halberdiers. For my lord, I did bring Boris. As I've mentioned before, I think Boris is one of the best lords in the game, just for his support abilities. I did bring him on a Griffin in this situation because against the Lizardmen, having the AP definitely helps, and the fact that he's got aerial mobility and all that is very nice. And of course, lizards can't really contest the skies at all. He does have the White Cloak of Ulrich, which is a great little AoE melee attack debuff, and then the Crush the Weak, which makes your opponents fall apart even faster once their leadership is below 50%. Finally, he does have the Midland Runefang, which is a constant source of regeneration, which is really nice when you are bringing Grey Wizard and don't have Lore of Life for your lord. It's also important to keep in mind that Fear and Terror does apply to all of the Saurus infantry. Even the Temple Guard are susceptible to terror routing, so it can be very useful in that sort of situation. And those melee attack debuffs definitely stack, and Saurus warriors don't have the best of melee attack to begin with, so hit by those debuffs from Boris, they're definitely much weaker. Alongside him, I did bring a Grey Wizard. This is definitely the lore of Shadows has always been something of a utility, well-rounded utility lore. It has some decent spells in just about every category: debuffs, buffs, and damage. In this situation, I had to bring Occam's Mind Razor because I have a lot of armor piercing on the field. I brought Pit of Shades because, of course, Pit of Shades does just do a lot of damage to armored infantry. And Melkoth's Mystifying Miasma, yeah, you can get it slow, but it doesn't do very much damage to have the high HP per model units like the Saurus Warriors. And then finally, we do have the Enfeebling Foe, which is a great little melee attack, melee defense debuff that can make enemies a little more susceptible to sniping. For my front line, it is composed entirely of halberds. You can see 6 units of them. You might be wondering why I decided to bring halberds rather than something like, say, great swords mixed in with cheap units, especially because halberds are rather expensive at 650. And that's actually because halberds have armor piercing and bonus against large, but they also have very high melee defense at 42. And that's actually very useful against Saurus warriors because, as you can see, they don't have the best of melee attack. It's only 29 here. And I do believe it's 28 baseline. So if they're trying to attack halberdiers, they're going to be hitting roughly 30% of the time. And that allows the halberdiers to definitely hold their ground and hit back pretty effectively. Of course, with the fairly high melee defense of the Saurus Warriors' shields, they're not going to be doing a trading 1-to-1. But nonetheless, it definitely makes them a pretty efficient, I think, unit. In the second line, we do have a bunch of handgunners, 2 units of them to be exact, as well as the silver bullets. And of course, the silver bullets do stock. This time around, I didn't bring Sterling's Revenge because it was a little too pricey for me. I couldn't quite cram it in. And I also figured that the handgunners with their extra range could actually be useful if I need to get in just that little extra volley in to my opponent before he closes the gap. Finally, in the back we do have the Royal Griffites as well as a unit of Demigriff halberds, and of course these guys are just there to try to counteract enemy monsters, do as much damage to them as they can, and all that good stuff. They're definitely a very potent unit to bring against the Lizardmen just because they have so much heavily armored large in their roster. Fortunately, I did actually spin the camera there. For my opponent, he did bring, you can see, a Skink Priest of Beasts up here in the air, and he only brought the Flock of Doom. Of course, this also does give you, he does also have a bomb ability with the drop rocks, though he only has 1, so doesn't do too much. And then, of course, the Charge of Cold-Blooded. So this is very useful. With Wild Heart, he'll have okay power reserves, though definitely that tends to be one of the problems with the Skink Priest, is that they just run out of power eventually. Over here on the ground, my opponent does have 4 chameleon skinks skirmishing with me, and here in the trees, of course, is his main force hidden, with Krokgar mounted on Grimlock leading the way. Now, Krokgar did get nerfed and actually all the Carnosaur mounts got nerfed a little bit. I do believe Krokgar lost 5 armor and took some other slight debuffs, but by and large, he's still a melee monster. He will easily tear Boris limb from limb, and he's got some pretty ridiculous stats. He's got, of course, Frenzy. He does have Cold-Blooded. He does, of course, have Sacred Spawning Zodal for that damage resistance, Swiftness of Easel for mobility, and then he actually brought the Hand of the Gods here to snipe away at Boris. And this could definitely do some nasty work, since if you can reduce your enemy's lords, that can definitely help swing the tide. For his front line, my opponent does have a whole bunch of Saurus Warriors with shields, with the exception of Great Swords. These guys will trade really well with anything Empire brings. They'll trade well even against halberdiers, though I do think the halberdiers should give them a decent run for their money. My opponent also did bring 2 Feral Stegodons, and I do think this is a little bit of an interesting choice. They are, of course, large, and they tend to rampage, which means you can often prevent them from getting where they want. So we'll definitely see how they perform. Over here you can see this King Priest does get zoned away a little bit by Boris, and the handguns are teeing off on the Chameleon Skinks, unfortunately wasting their projectiles. And of course the Chameleon Skinks are whittling down Boris. Boris, while he does have regen, is definitely susceptible to that sort of stuff. Over here, Krokgar does take a nasty volley to the face, losing about a good chunk of HP. You can see though the Hand of God completely connects on Boris, and Boris is definitely already faltering. He's at less than half HP, and the game's barely begun. You can see Krokgar, who does kind of push past the Halberdiers, who I don't want to unbrace him because we do need to stop that Feral Stegodon, but we immediately hit him with Enfeebling Foe and zone him away with the help of the Demigryph Halberds as well as the Royal Griffites. Over here, the Demigryph Halberds do plow straight on, going after the Feral Stegodon. Feral Stegodon does have a bonus against infantry, and so it will trade somewhat effectively with Halberds, but with the Demigryphs thrown in the mix, it should get melted fairly quickly. You can see over here, poor Krokgar just getting absolutely demolished. And the Halberds, as you can see, are holding their ground somewhat okay and doing some major damage to the Stegodon. It's already down by about 1,000 HP and quickly dropping to essentially all Halberdiers. Fortunately, my handguns are getting a little greedy here, pushing a little too far to the front. And of course, Flock of Doom goes down. The problem with Flock of Doom, at least for this army, is that it's so very lightly armored. Flock of Doom will do immense damage. Over here, I made a bit of a mistake. Although my Royal Griffites are doing some immense work against this Feral Stegodon, they are taking massive damage. Of course, the Sarge Warriors' shields hit pretty hard. They hit like trucks, and they have some decent AP in the mix anyway. And plus, my Royal Griffites are getting poisoned, so they're just taking huge amounts of damage here. Halberdiers, of course, though, holding the line somewhat effectively against the Sarge Warriors. You can see they're trading somewhat effectively. They won't win, obviously, but they're definitely holding the line. Fortunately, Royal Griffites are routing, and my handgunners are kind of milling around and just not being the most efficient. Over here, though, Krokgar does make a mistake, gets a little greedy, dives in, and I hit him with an Enfeebling Foe right away. I've definitely been saving that debuff for whenever he tries to get a little too cheeky and go in. The handguns, of course, will immediately start wailing on him and melting down his HP at a ridiculous pace. And as you can see, Halberds are still holding, still bringing down this Feral Stegodon slowly but surely, chipping away at his HP. And this Feral Stegodon has actually been shattered for good, so that's definitely first blood for myself. Over here, Boris does get a lovely little recharge into the Sarge Warriors' shields. You can see that once again, the Halberds, while definitely not winning, are slowly but surely bleeding away at the Sarge Warriors' HP. There's definitely this fight down here is definitely kind of generating. You can see the Royal Griffites have been routed off, and they're down to just a handful of models, 7 over there, and I have no way of replenishing them. But as long as the Halberds keep holding, and you can see they're holding rather effectively, and as long as I can get some routes, I can definitely get some efficient kind of damage. I do think my opponent is not watching and try to drop a bit of shades on these Chameleon Skinks, which completely whiffs, and this was definitely a big mistake, a big waste of my Winds of Magic. But now I'm trying to use my handguns to slowly but surely chip away at my opponent's high-end monsters, trying to kill all these Feral Stegodon and eventually deal with Krokgar if he gets cheeky one more time and tries to go deep. Over here you can see, of course, the Royal Griffites do plow into my opponent's flank. You can see another Hand of Gods going into Boris, but Boris still does have an okay amount of regen, and you can see Krokgar just taking all that handgun fire. The moment he gets a little greedy, the moment he tries to overextend, the handguns are on top of him, and they're immediately melting him down. Over here, the Halberds are definitely kind of clumped up. This is definitely an excessive commitment from me, and it's definitely not good. You can see, though, Krokgar does kind of topple here, and he's brought low by the raw might of handgun fire. And at this point, my opponent does actually decide to GG out. With his leadership buckling, his Feral Stegodon rampaging and falling apart, and only a handful of units really left on the field. The Chameleon Skinks, obviously, while they most likely could if they wanted to wipe out the rest of my handguns, they will not be able to deal with all of this infantry, with my cavalry and all that sort of stuff. So there's definitely, at this point, definitely my opponent's army was buckling. I do think it's a little premature because he could have perhaps buckled my Halberds with the Sarge Warriors still, and then maybe secured something from there. But definitely pretty tight fight. Definitely pretty interesting to see. You can see the losses for my opponent. It was mostly just came down to the two heroes who got gunned down, and then the 2 monsters getting shredded. The rest of these troops actually held out somewhat well. You can see the Halberds didn't really rake in many kills, and that was to be expected. Sarge Warriors have high HP per model, and do have decent melee defense, but they did hold the line for long enough for my handgunners and my demigryphs to really lay the smack down on all of the large targets. And once the large targets are gone, you can definitely cycle charge the Sarge Warriors into oblivion. You can kind of tank out the Chameleon Skinks. They don't do the most damage. They're a decent anti-missile counter, and my opponent probably should have pressured my backline a little more if he wanted to get the most out of them. But they're definitely not the best at countering, say, cavalry or lords or that sort of stuff. They just don't have the damage per shot. Nonetheless, I do think this is a somewhat decent build. I'm not entirely convinced this is the best way to deal with the Dinos, but I do think it's decent, just because it makes them think twice about charging in with their large units. And if they do charge in with their large units, they will get stripped down. If they bring a bunch of infantry, they will get kind of stalled out. Spears, because they have such little armor piercing, will often just get kind of plowed through, ignored, and they can't really deliver that much hurt to units like Stegodons. Nonetheless, great game to my opponent, Watch Chief here. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. I didn't know this was a really short one, and but I just wanted to kind of show this build because I wanted to try it out. Just halberds against dinos, and getting a good demonstration match can be somewhat difficult, since obviously a lot of times players won't just simply run what you would like to see. So, nonetheless, great game to my opponent. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, criticism, any questions, be sure to post them down in the comments, and I'll respond as soon as I can. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.